In Paris, violent clashes erupted between police and protesters for the third straight weekend. The clashes began near the Arc de Triomphe early on Saturday and continued into the night between police and protesters known as Yellow Jackets for their bright clothes. For more on the riot, CBS News correspondent Elaine Cobb joins us now by phone in Paris. Elaine, what's driving the forces behind these protests?
Rena, it started with a new tax on gasoline, and the French said, look, this is enough. Gas has already gone up this year. We can't afford more. But it has become much more. It's become a general discontent with what is seen as continuing rising taxes, which are making the cost of living just very high. They feel their wages are not keeping track with these rises in taxes, and their salaries are just not following.
Elaine, these images are incredible we're seeing right now. A car turned upside down, just engulfed in flames. Describe what the sense is there in Paris right now.
Well, it started with something of a divided protest, in fact, because anyone who wanted to protest on the Champs-Élysées had to go through police cordons, had to subject to stringent searches, and there were a little over 1,000 on the Champs-Élysées doing that. But many others decided, no, I don't want to, and were very early in the morning at the Arc de Triomphe, and where there were violent clashes from very early on. There were running riots with the police. They were picking up barricades and throwing them at police vans. The police were moving to try to keep them away. They were using tear gas all day long. The sound of tear gas canisters could be heard across the city, I have to tell you, particularly when the protesters were moving in small groups across the city. And some of them climbed up onto the top of the Arc de Triomphe and even graffitied there in favor of their Yellow Vest movement. That's something that has drawn a lot of criticism. But the numbers were not very big. But what they did this time was they very much moved across the city in small groups. I passed a burnt-out bank. It was completely destroyed. There were cars burnt, and there were metal barricades that had been piled up in the middle of roads to disrupt traffic. There are quite a number of roadworks on across the city, and many of those who wanted to cause violence were clearly using them for materials.
It looks like a war zone in Paris. We know French President Emmanuel Macron is in Buenos Aires for the G20. Has the French government issued any sort of response to the violence?
Well, Macron has, in fact, just been asked about it in Buenos Aires, and he said, these people clearly want chaos, but we will never accept violence. And he said they'll be found and prosecuted. He complained that the violence has nothing to do with the peaceful expression of legitimate anger. The government has also said it's clear that while there were some who went to protest peacefully, many people turned up just to cause violence, and they say they will be caught. But it must be noted that the protesters say they're not ready to stop. They're not ready to give in just yet, and the government isn't ready to give in to their demands. So this looks set to continue.
Looks like everything's going pretty well for Macron in France. The Jupiterian presidency storming ahead with the cops beating working people for daring to protest that his fuel tax hikes, presumably in an attempt to stop climate change or something like that, is leading to his cops beating citizens on the streets. Kind of looks like this tide's going against Macron versus the yellow vests. You know, those regular people who just want to live their lives in peace and harmony. How very dare they? At least some of the police here have recognised that maybe, just maybe, these people have a point. Who's going to blink first? Alexander Macron. Because people forget that when people think, oh, the French are cowards, no, the French leadership is cowardly. The French people themselves have got balls of steel. French Prime Minister Edouard Philippe announced on Tuesday that new concessions to Yellow Vest protesters, saying planned increase in the price of fuel will be suspended for 6 months. I bet they won't even come back. I bet they don't dare. No tax merits putting the unity of the nation in danger, he said. And the anger on the streets originates from a profound injustice of not being able to live with dignity from one's work. Well, who the fuck caused that? Who did this to them? Oh, right, that's right, it's the French government with your tax hikes. Don't sit there and act like this is just profound injustice descended from the sky and we didn't know what to do about it. It was your tax hikes, wasn't it? French MPs have said that the government plans to freeze upcoming increases on regulated electricity and gas prices as well. Stricter emission controls set to kick in January 2019 will also be suspended, one of the demands of the Yellow Vest movement which erupted last month, because these demonstrations are over fuel taxes which are financing France's anti-pollution efforts. Yes, this is about the globalist mindset that is controlling Europe at the moment, that thinks that the nation state is fundamentally one of the core barriers to them fixing the planet in every way that they think they can do. And therefore, the nation state should be essentially eroded. Sovereignty should be seceded to the European Union. The borders should be opened. We should take in people from all around the world. But the fact of the matter is, people are not ready to give up their nation states. These things that have existed for hundreds of years and proved useful to the people that live within them and have allowed them to flourish and produce the first world level of quality of life that we all now enjoy, at least in the West, we are not ready to give that up. And unfortunately for the rest of the world, they are not at the point where socially or economically or politically they are able to simply move to our countries and just be like us. They hold different values, and the values are being expressed in ways that are harmful to the native populations of these countries. And when those people say, hey, by the way, we don't approve of grooming gangs or street fighting or whatever the next problem is, you say, well, that means you're a fucking racist. No. These people have legitimate grievances, and they must be listened to. How many quote-unquote far-right parties need to win elections before you start listening? Hillary Clinton said, well, you know what, it's the mass immigration that's doing this. People are not ready to just say, we don't have a country so anyone can come here. They're just not ready for it. And when Hillary Clinton said it, I was like, wow, I can't believe it. I mean, I've been saying it for years, but to hear like someone, a globalist like Hillary Clinton finally go, okay, maybe there are other problems coming along that we didn't really anticipate. Maybe the populations of our countries are simply not ready for it and will resist it at the ballot box as well as in the streets. Maybe we should change our tactic. Apparently not. And now look what you're getting. I bet they were absolutely thrilled to report on the fact that an anti-illegal immigration and anti-abortion party, I imagine they're heavily Catholic, in Spain are winning seats in Andalusia. I bet that was just music to their ears. And I bet they didn't have any crisis of conscience and think, are we partially responsible for this? Is it us advocating for unlimited immigration and being pro-illegal immigration? Is that somehow contributing? I mean, there's no justification for illegal immigration. It's not like we don't get 250,000 legal immigrants into this country, our country, every goddamn year. God knows what Spain gets. God knows what France gets. I dread to think about just the raw numbers of people who weren't invited by the population, but were invited by the globalist leadership. That's the problem. And unsurprisingly, people aren't happy with it, and there's no reason that they should be. But as the Telegraph points out, this is just a symptom of a class divide. The globalists versus the nationalists. Macron is considered to be a president for the rich who are invariably globalist, because they can afford to take advantage of the benefits of globalism. They can afford to go to anywhere in the world, do anything that they want. That's their privilege as rich people. But that isn't a privilege that's shared by the working people of their home nations. And yet they will actively work against the national interests of their own countries, because they've got it in their head that they can be the great white saviours of the world. We can fix everything if only our own populations suffer enough. If only they accept as much immigration as possible. If only they give up the sovereignty of their own nations to supranational organisations like the European Union. If only. No, it can't carry on. It won't carry on. The people in these countries are losing their quality of life because of the things that the globalists are doing. This must end. There's simply no other question. You can't sit there and go, oh, you're xenophobic, you're racist, you're this, you're that. They don't care. They will say it's not our problem if you feel your moral standards aren't being upheld by us. That's your problem. Don't impose these problems on us, and maybe we won't even have to have this conversation. In the wake of these protests, Macron's popularity fell to what? 23%. About half of Donald Trump's approval rating. What does this tell you, Emmanuel? Oh, Jupiterian one. What does it tell you when literally more than three quarters of your country don't approve of what you're doing? They think you're fucking it up. How's Merkel doing? Oh, that's right. She's already been sunsetted by her own party because the German people, her approval rating has gone in a steady decline as well. How's Donald Trump's approval rating doing? Oh, what's that? In the mid-40s? Wow, you wish you could have an approval rating like that, don't you? When you are the leader of a nation state, you should take into regard that you are there to serve the people of that nation state. You are not there to serve the people of other countries. It is not your job to settle the problems of people in Angola or Pakistan or somewhere in the Orient. That's not your damn job. Your job is to make sure France prospers. And when France prospers, the other countries that are connected to it via trade, via immigration, via diplomacy will also prosper. And if national leaders take it into their heads to actually give a shit about their countries, then that's how the world will get better. Because, hey, guess what? That's how we got to this point in the fucking first place. It was the national leaders giving a damn about their own nations and helping them to be secure and protect the rights of the citizens so the citizens can make one another rich, happy and prosperous. That's all we're asking for. And so when it starts, oh, by the way, you could revoke Article 50. You could cancel it and stay in the EU. I tell you what, I dread to think what the consequence of that's going to be. Because that will mean in this country that democracy is over. And I don't really want to transition into a post-democracy world. At least not quite yet. Because we don't have anything planned for afterwards, do we? I think it's going to get bloody ugly if we do something like this. So just remember, Brexit has to happen. And in protest about the way Theresa May is handling Brexit, I will be speaking, along with many other people, at the Brexit Betrayal rally that is taking place in London outside Whitehall this Sunday. I'll leave a link in the description. Please come down to it and show them that you are not yet ready to sacrifice your nation states. These are useful, these are important, these are vital to our happiness, our security and our well-being. We cannot afford to get rid of them. We must remain the sovereign nations that we have been for our entire lives and for hundreds of years up until this point, until this ridiculous ideology of globalism took over. Because at the end of the day, this is going to carry on. It's not going to get any better. It's not going to get easier for the people who are now struggling more and more every day because of mass immigration, because of the ideologically driven taxes that are being imposed on them. They will keep voting for more and more radical parties. So let's just stem this now. Let's just cut it off at the source. If we can see what's breathing life into what could turn into a terrible beast, let's deal with it now. Let's just close the borders. Let's accept that we will keep our nation states. In the case of Britain, let's get out of Europe. Let's just do this. Because otherwise, who knows what comes next? And honestly, do you really want to see? Do you really want to open up this Pandora's box? Come on.